Now we will enter a turbulent yet fascinating stage of life, adolescence. Some of you may have just left this stage. Some of you may be at the end of this stage. And some of you have had this stage in the rearview mirror for quite some time. This stage actually did not exist until 1904, when G. Stanley Hall published his monumental work called Adolescence, Its Psychology and Its Relations to Physiology, Anthropology, Sociology, Sex, Crime, Religion, and Education. Prior to this point, there had been increasing discussion about individuals who had passed puberty but were not yet considered adults. Finally, a term was developed for those individuals, adolescents. Chapter 9 introduces us to changes of the body and mind in years 12 through 18, which is roughly the stage that we consider adolescence. It is marked by the transformative experience of puberty, which involves intense physical growth and surging hormones. For both girls and boys, and please note that I refer to binary genders for the purposes of simplification, puberty begins as young as 8 years of age or as late as 14 years of age, and there are various reasons for these variations in onset. 2/3 of the variations in age of puberty are determined by genes. Sex chromosomes, stress, and body fat also play roles. Regarding body fat, an interesting trend has been identified globally and over time. As food becomes more available and nutrition improves in societies, children are meeting their genetic potential because they get adequate nutrition. In turn, they gain weight and puberty begins earlier. This is known as the secular trend. In areas where malnutrition still exists, such as in parts of Africa, puberty begins later, much as it did in 16th century Europe. During puberty, girls experience their first menstrual period, known as menarche, and increased production of estradiol. Boys experience their first ejaculation of seminal fluid, known as spermarche, and increased production of testosterone. There are noticeable changes in boys and girls in their primary sex characteristics, which are directly involved in reproduction, as well as secondary sex characteristics, which are not directly involved in reproduction, but signify sexual maturity and masculinity versus femininity. Hormonal changes in each gender cause a phase delay in the circadian rhythm, which is the day-night wake-sleep cycle that occurs approximately every 24 hours. This is one of many reasons that adolescents are sleepy during the day, often dozing off in class, and may remain awake for hours at night. Be sure to read the opposing perspectives highlight on page 319 about school start times. You may be surprised to learn that later high school start times have been associated with less adolescent depression, higher grades, and less student absenteeism. Still, there are plenty of arguments about why school should not start later. The debate goes on, and the issue represents another one of those sticky policy wickets. Many teens do not receive adequate nutrition for a variety of reasons. One of which relates to body dissatisfaction. It is important to note that this occurs among people of all genders, is influenced by multiple cultural factors, and can lead to a distorted body image, the root cause of eating disorders. Be sure to go through the required video activity posted about this for the week. Brain development among adolescents results in dramatic cognitive advances that allow individuals to think beyond the way children do, though not quite like adults. Piaget described a shift to formal operational thought, his final stage of cognitive development, though you will see that another stage was proposed for adulthood. Using formal operational thinking, people can use systemic logic, deductive and inductive reasoning, as well as abstractions. Related to this, adolescents are sensation-seeking, imaginative, ruminating, deep thinkers. They tend to be highly egocentric, which can be positive in many ways, though you will see how the dominance of their emotional, intuitive side of the brain, combined with this egocentrism, can lead to some poor decision-making. The fact that adolescents today are digital natives adds another interesting element to the mix. They have grown up with the internet and its instant, endless information, with the smartphone and its constant entertainment and ways of communicating. In a world of streaming music, Bluetooth, ebooks, Amazon, Netflix, and Uber. I'm curious to see the conversations that unfold regarding this topic in this week's discussion thread. This chapter concludes with an overview of teaching and learning during this stage. There are many cognitive advances during the stage and lots of ways that schools try to accommodate the changing needs of kids. Please watch the short required video about education and adolescence posted in Launchpad. As I'm sure many of you are familiar with, high-stakes testing enters the realm of one's life during adolescence, and there is much debate as to the usefulness and design of such tests. Without question, future employers will want some way to evaluate skills and abilities that were ostensibly learned during high school. One way that learning has been evaluated internationally is by administering the PSY, or Program for International Student Assessment, to 15-year-olds across the world. U.S. students perform markedly lower on this exam than many other nations, leaving us with many questions about how we can improve educational attainment and performance in our country. Chapter 10, The Social World of Adolescence, introduces Erikson's fifth psychosocial crisis, identity versus role confusion. According to Erikson, the ultimate goal of the identity crisis is identity achievement. Self-expression and self-concept are so important during this stage, as individuals seek to understand who they are as distinct individuals, separate from people around them. Identity achievement involves reconsidering goals and values of their parents and culture, accepting some things and discarding others, and forging their own identity. It does not involve a denial of past experiences and childhood identifications. James Marcia identified 4 types of coping, 3 of which are specific ways in which young people cope with the identity crisis before they reach identity achievement. These include role confusion, a state in which teens are floundering and lost, foreclosure, an immature acceptance of the roles and values without question and exploration, and moratorium, the more mature identity status in which teens take a time out to explore a temporary path without committing and reaching achievement right away. So what is meant by having an identity anyway? Erikson highlighted 4 aspects of identity: religious, political, vocational, and sexual. Religious identity is similar to that of an adolescent's parents or community, and often remains, although most adolescents do question their religion as a result of their ability to think more critically and analytically. Political identity is similar, though in the 21st century, most adolescents do not strongly affiliate with one political party over another. Also, many of the social justice movements are driven by young, passionate individuals. Vocational identity originally referred to the particular occupation of a teenager, though this was when it made more sense for teenagers to have started a career. Now we recognize that this identity can take years to establish, and that adolescents need plenty of non-work time to form their identities. In fact, research suggests that working 20 or more hours while attending high school impedes identity formation. Finally, Erikson identified sexual identity, which we have now replaced with gender identity. And this does not always reflect biological characteristics. It refers to a person's self-identification as male gender, female gender, transgender, or otherwise. It is more inclusive, therefore, and often very complex for individuals when they are experiencing the changes of puberty, hormones, and general confusion about love and relationships. Relationships of different types change during adolescence. You will want to review the types of conflict that are most common between parents and adolescents, noting when conflict peaks and when the relationship improves. More important than conflict may be family closeness, which consists of 4 key aspects: communication, support, connectedness, and control. These dynamics begin in infancy and early childhood, and when they have been strong, they can serve to ease the transitions in adolescence. Relationships with peers are highly influential at this stage, and adolescents strive for friendship and often for popularity. Peers can be more helpful than harmful, though peer pressure is certainly a concern among parents during this stage. Since emotional control is not fully developed by adolescents, they may follow their inner impulses and desire to score points with their friends, often leading to risk-taking behaviors such as drinking, speeding, or skipping class. When a person encourages this delinquent behavior by showing how to rebel against authority or social norms, this is known as deviancy training. Romantic partnerships also emerge during this stage, often including a first love. Separate from gender identity, though certainly intertwined, is a person's sexual orientation. Adolescents tend to have fluid sexual orientation, so they may be attracted to or sexually involved with people of their own gender, opposite gender, neither, or both. In many societies, attitudes toward the LGBTQ community are changing for the better, allowing people of all ages to feel more safe and comfortable with where they fall on the continuums of gender and sexual orientation. One of the hotly debated issues related to this stage is how to educate teens about safe sex. Everyone has had different experiences with sex education in school, and there does not seem to be a consensus about when it should be introduced, or even whether the school is the right place for it, and how much content should be covered. Nonetheless, sexually transmitted infections and unplanned pregnancies are significant issues during this stage. It is typical for children to lose confidence and experience depression at puberty, but then self-esteem typically rises. Some adolescents experience clinical depression, however, in which feelings of hopelessness, lethargy, and worthlessness last for 2 weeks or more. The rate of clinical depression is higher for adolescent girls than it is for adolescent boys, and it is often related to rumination, which is more common among girls. Age 15 is the most typical age for suicidal ideation, which can then lead to parasuicide. You should become familiar with these terms and how the rates compare for adolescent males and females in the United States. The final part of this chapter covers delinquent behavior and drug abuse and use. Trends of drug use shift over time, but scientists are now confident that alcohol and marijuana, common drugs used in adolescence, can be harmful to the developing brain and impulsive behavior of teens. There is a required video posted in Launchpad for you to watch about substance abuse among adolescents. Unfortunately, anti-drug messaging is not always effective, especially because of generational forgetting. The idea that each new generation forgets what the previous generation learned and therefore experiences the same harmful experiences. The good news is that public education has been effective in curbing cigarette smoking among adolescents. That's all of the content I'm going to discuss in the message this week. Don't forget to read the Our Kids excerpt that is also posted in Launchpad as it relates to your discussion post. Next week, we will see how many of these concepts carry over into emerging adulthood, which is covered in only one chapter. Although you will get a bit of a midterm break, you will have some supplemental content, so make sure to plan accordingly.